because I just discovered a new comet or a shooting star zooming through space. Then I realized it was just another Aaron Judge blast. Hi everyone, this is Will O'Toole welcoming you to another edition of Park Ridge Sports History. And in this edition, I'd like to go over the times that the Yankees scored 20 or more runs in a game throughout their history. I actually traced it all the way back to when they became the New York Yankees, way back about 1913, 1914, when they were originally the Baltimore Orioles, then moved over, became the Highlanders, the New York Highlanders, and eventually stayed with that great name, the New York Yankees. I had an old cartoon that I just recently released to Substack, and it was about Aaron Judge. And lo and behold, I was thinking about Judge, hadn't hit a home run yet. The season was just about to begin. I saw the cartoon, and I just wanted to post it because I really liked the drawing itself. Sometimes you really fall in love with the whole creative side of it. Sometimes the drawing really works well, or you just know it as when you're working on something where it really looks good. Anyway, I really liked this particular drawing. I loved how I paneled it. I loved just the drawing itself, the crazy astronomers, all the rest of it in the cartoon. Anyway, Judge goes out. I no sooner put this up, and I do an article that we did last week. If you recall, I was talking about number of RBIs per 100 games and where Judge ranks among the great Yankee immortals of Ruth and Gehrig and Mantle. And I had said that he's actually way ahead of Mantle in terms of RBIs per 100 games. And I did it in a percentage. And actually, Judge is 70 RBIs for every 100 games he plays. Meanwhile, Mantle's about 62 or 63 for every game he plays. I'll give you those stats in a second. But we did a whole show on that. I thought it was kind of interesting, just a different way of looking at statistics. And I think in probably a simpler fashion than sometimes that the metrics have evolved into. Anyway, I did the Judge, and lo and behold, he hits 3 home runs. The Yankees squashed the Brewers 20-9 in the second or third game of the year. And I just thought about it, and they said that the Yankees hadn't scored 20 runs in a game since they beat Toronto in about 2020 or whatever. So this is what I do. Had extra time. People say, man, I have a lot of time on my hand. To them, I say, no, I create it. So too bad. I like investigating sports history. I like doing research. Now, I went all the way back using some of my tried and tested websites like Baseball Research and Baseball Almanac. Really a shout out to them because they do such a marvelous job. And as you know, I always tell people, when you go onto these sites, you really have to get used to navigating them because every one is so totally different. From one sports website to another, they're totally different. They've created differently. They have different departments that you have to weave your way through. Baseball Reference is, for me right now, my go-to place. But sometimes they don't have it a way it's arranged like Baseball Almanac. This time they did because they basically go back and they have every box score all the way back to 2000 to 1915 and beyond that. So I did some investigating and discovered that, ready for this, the Yankees have had in their history 27 games where they have scored 20 or more runs. And I want to tell you, Yankee fans, I just want to give you this. They are undefeated in those 20 run plus games. But then I was starting to do this. After I did it, I noticed that not so much a pattern, but they would go years, just like they're doing now, 3-4 years. And then it would be clustered where they would have 2-3 years in a row. I went all the way back. Originally, I went back to when Ruth first arrived on the team because really, that is when the Yankees became the Yankees. Once Ruth arrives, the winning begins for the Yankees. Their first year that they scored 20 runs was 1920. So they are keeping up with the pace, 27 over, let's say 105. So they're basically doing it about once every 4 years, maybe even a little bit less. But regardless, scoring 20 runs is an amazing thing. And then I was looking about how many times some of these Yankee teams came close but didn't. And I'll just go over a couple of things. For instance, ready for this? In 1931, they had two 20-run games, both victories, both over Midwestern teams, Detroit and Chicago. They hammered Detroit 20-8. And then on July 26th, they hammered the White Sox 20-5. And then in 1932, they won 20-13 over Philadelphia. An amazing game. Because why? I'm going to get into that in a little bit. Ruth and Gehrig were amazing, particularly Gehrig. But that year in particular, Gehrig had his 4 home run game. The Yankees would go on, win the World Series 4 straight. They would win 111 games total that season in 1932. Then 36 arrives. And of course, with that is the Joe DiMaggio regime. So in 36, 37, 39, 40, and then in 43, they scored over 20 runs, at least in one game in that season. Interestingly enough, in 1936, the Yankees scored over 10 runs 40 times that year, 1936. And they allowed their opponents only 13 times to get over the 10-plus mark, which is kind of interesting because when you think about it, that's 53 of 154 games. 1 out of every 3 games, one or the other, or maybe sometimes both teams were scoring at will 10 runs per game, which is really, when you think about it, incredibly hard. Even in this day with home runs galore, they're not really hitting with men on base. Although I will tell you this, I've done some investigation, and obviously it doesn't take a brain surgeon to realize this, that the most common home runs are solo shots. And obviously the most rare are grand slams. And I remember doing a show on Park Ridge doing a typical season of Earl Weaver. And because he's the one who has espoused the 3-run home run, played defense, great pitching, all the rest of it. Well, even those great Oriole teams of 69, 70, and 71, wasn't like they had a plethora of 3-run home runs or an over-the-top number as compared to the rest of the league. So what's happening today is that guys may be getting on base with walks or maybe hitting home runs, but they're spread out more. And of course, the base hit, it's really, well, that's for another show. Anyway, I want to keep it on this. 1937, they beat Detroit. Seems like Detroit and the Philadelphia A's were common opponents who were thrashed with the 20 or more. They scored probably their game high, actually their greatest number that I saw in the history, because this is pretty anecdotal. I went through, then went through again, did it about 3 times. So if I missed a season, I doubt it, but it's possible. They beat the A's 25-2, and that remains their highest run score that I've seen in 1936. Then it's always been 20, 21, 2011, 22-9. They beat the A's back in 2011. I don't remember that. And put it this way, since 1955, from 1955 all the way back to about 1932, the Yankees scored 20 or more runs in a game. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times in those 20 years, 25 years. After that, 1960 on, this is really weird. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times since 1960. So you're talking my age of 64, 65 years. And in those 25 years, they had so many. Now, a lot of reasons for that. Smaller ballparks, day games, more East Coast instead of cross traveling. All those things probably came into play. But don't have the DH like you do today. You don't have all of the metrics like you do today, or all of the videotaping of the players' swings and all the rest of it. So really, when you think about it, it balances out. Really what I discovered, and I wish I were a mathematician, but there's really no pattern per se, but it seems to happen in clusters. That's my perception right now. It happens in clusters. All right, lo and behold, so I go down and I break it down to the box scores, and this is what I found was fun. Judge has the 3 home runs in the game against the Brewers, knocks in 7 RBIs and all the rest of it. So I wanted to see what players were involved in the most. And of course, I think it's pretty easy, but I wanted to make sure my assumption was actually correct. Ruth and Gehrig were involved in the most with Ruth. And this, again, all I can say is this. After I did my deep dive, my dumpster dive into the box scores and all the rest of it, I didn't discover anything new necessarily that I didn't learn or didn't know before. And I'm not talking about individual box scores or just some weird number scheming that I saw with this. But what I mean is this. I think anybody who doesn't recognize Ruth and Gehrig as hitters, now I'm just talking about hitters, as 2 of the greatest, probably 5 best hitters of all time, really hasn't dug into the numbers and really hasn't seen what those 2 did as teammates. They are the single greatest. They are the single greatest players ever paired in the history of baseball. It'll never happen again. 2 guys, totally different in personality, but man, they were beasts at bat. Prove it? Okay. Yes, Ruth and Gehrig did have bad World Series. They had great World Series. That 1932 series, I think, man, they just single-handedly, those 2 destroyed the Cubbies. I'm gonna save Ruth and Gehrig for last, okay? Bob Musial. I did a quick one of him. I think he was only involved in 3. But he was 3 for 10 in these games. He had 2 home runs and 2 doubles, had 4 runs scored and 5 RBIs to go with a walk. Now, why do I say this? Because it just gets better with some of the great players. Derek Jeter. And notice this. I took, outside of Bob Musial, I took Lou Gehrig, Babe Ruth, Yogi Berra, often overlooked. He really is overlooked. Joe DiMaggio and Ruth. And I did say Mickey Mantle. Basically, I took the guys who are seen as the Mount Rushmore of players in Yankee history. You have basically Ruth and Gehrig. You have Mantle, DiMaggio, Berra. I don't know how you guys feel. Maybe Mariano, you feel, might be up there. Maybe the kids of today might think it's Derek Jeter. Maybe there's going to be someone moved off so that Aaron Judge is in there. But I think probably most baseball historians would say this. Ruth, Gehrig, Mantle, and maybe that last spot might be up for discussion. Some might say DiMaggio with his 9 World Series, his 56-game hitting streak, his great years with the Yankees, Hall of Fame player. Me, I like Burr simply because he won. 3-time MVP, played the most demanding position of any of the guys who you talk to about Mount Rushmore catcher. I don't think there's a tougher position to play, maybe outside of quarterback, maybe goalie, but just the long process of playing every day makes catching so difficult. You're getting beat up, and then you got to hit. Then you got to handle the psychology or the big babies on the mound. aka the pitchers, and then you got to handle the umpire behind you to keep the pitcher in the game with the strike zone, and you got to handle your manager who's yelling and screaming at you like, "Hey, is this guy tired? Should I take him out?" So a catcher is under enormous pressure. Plus, he's got to worry about the guy running the second because it's the greatest position to play, though, without a doubt, the most demanding and the greatest position to play in baseball. Anyway, so I did Ruth, I did DiMaggio, I did Berra, Mantle, Jeter. Let's get Jeter out of the way. And I shouldn't really say it that way, but he's 16 for 35 in these 20-run games. And actually, he has participated in 1, 2, 3. He was in 5, 7 of them. He was in 7. Now I'm looking at this. He was in 7 of them. And he went 16 for 35, 3 doubles, a home run, 2 homers, 15 runs scored, and 8 RBIs to go with 4 walks. He actually stole a base in a 20-run game. But it gets better because Mantle actually stole 2 steals, had 2 stolen bases in one of those 20 run blowouts. Mickey Mantle is probably he only played in 2. He missed a couple of them, probably due to injury and being a first-year player. In fact, Mantle, I think his career stemmed from, let's say, 51 to 68, and really from 62 to 87, 63 to 87, nothing with the Yankees. Kind of incredible because they had Maris and Mantle, and all those home runs in 61 didn't do it. 62 they do, 21-7. And in that 62 game, or rather, 62, and also in 1955. I believe in the 55 game, ready for this? Mantle goes 3 for 4, had a double and 2 home runs, his 23rd and 24th home runs of the year. Plus he had 7 RBIs in the game. And he had 2 steals. Don't ask me why. And what was interesting, and here's where the deep dive comes in. Didn't know this. All right, so Mantle has 24 home runs. That game was, I'm pretty sure it was Baltimore 1955. It's late August. And yet Mantle only had 7 doubles on the year. I was really kind of amazed about that. No pun intended to the great Willie Mays. So 24 home runs and only 7 doubles. I think he finished with 11 or 12 that year. This is the deep dive where you start to look at player stats and all the rest of it. Yogi Berra was pretty incredible too. Berra was 8 for 13, 3 doubles, and 4 home runs. He actually hit not only 4 home runs, he had 7 runs scored and 15 RBIs. And interestingly enough, his game, here's how wild, and mathematics and the probability and all the rest of it would help me out here to understand this. But here was the only pattern I saw with Berra. Ready for this? In one game, he drove in 3 to get up to 75 RBIs for a year. In another, he drove in 2 to get up to 77 on the season. In another, he drove in 5 to get him up to 77 in a year. In another one, he drove in 5 to get up to 85 RBIs. And basically what I'm saying is all these games seem to occur, and Berra was in the RBI echelon of, let's say, 70 to 80 RBIs. Kind of wild because the other day, here's Judge hitting it, and it's basically 3 games into the season. Here's Berra, and it seems to be coming in late August. So could you say, well, there seems to be a lot of runs scored early in the season because maybe the hitters are ahead of the pitchers, or maybe there aren't a lot because maybe the ball is a little dead because it's cold air, because it's spring and the temperatures aren't as hot or as high as they are in August and September. None of that is really comes out in this study, at least with the Yankees. Now we get on to the real good guys. And that is Joe DiMaggio, Babe Ruth, and Lou Gehrig. And let me just say this. Berra was incredible. 8 of 13, so you're hitting over 500. Derek Jeter, just under 500, but 16 for 35. I think any baseball player worth his salt would love to go 16 for 35 over 7 games. You can make a new contract out of that. Here is what DiMaggio did. DiMaggio was 13 of 24 in those games. In only one of those games, he only played 5 of them, only 5. But in 4 of the 5, he had 3 hits. He had 7 at-bats in one game. Then he had 2 doubles, a triple, and 5 home runs. Now for DiMaggio, interestingly enough, he hit his 3rd home run of the season in one of those episodes. Then in one of the games, he hit his 4th and 5th. And then in a third 20 or more run games, he hit his 15th and 16th. But he drove in 17. All right, 17 RBIs, which I think was the highest of any of the ball players, with the exception of Lou Gehrig, who just mashed the ball. He even had more RBIs than Babe Ruth. Ruth only had 14. Okay, so now here's the fun part. Now I get to do Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. And in first of all, I believe I'm going to count this again. Ruth, I think, played the most. He had 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He had 8 games where he was participating in which the Yankees scored. Now, I didn't do the Red Sox. It was strictly only the Yankees. The team scored 20 or more runs 8 times in his career as a Yankee. Some guys never do it at all. And here he is doing it almost as if it was part of the season. Okay, what game do we play the 20? Do we score the 20 runs in? All right. So anyway, Ruth goes. Ruth hits. Ruth only had 5 doubles. He only had 1 triple. And he only had 3 home runs in his games. I just want to do this again. Ruth only had 3 home runs in any of those games. But Ruth had 3 hits, twice, and he had a 5 for 6 game in which he hit his 38th home run to go with 3 RBIs and 4 runs scored in that game. Probably his best game. It would be interesting to see what you would consider Babe Ruth's greatest game as a Yankee, regular season, and probably World Series. Probably the 32 World Series was both Gehrig's and Ruth's greatest performance. I do believe it was 32. And they just bashed the Cubs. Ruth in this game was 5 for 6, 2 doubles, his 38th home run, 4 runs scored, 3 RBIs, and a walk. Now, here's where I laugh. Ruth, ready for this? In those 8 games, drew 5, 8, 10, 13. He drew 13 walks. Why do you walk him to face one like Lou Gehrig? But it happened. Put it this way. Gehrig totaled 17 hits and 30 at-bats, well over 500. He had 5 doubles, a triple, and 3 home runs to go with 16 runs scored, 14 RBIs. He had 567. He had a slugging average of 1.10. Most slugging averages, if they're any good, it's always 0.800 or 0.500. Ruth's was 1.10. By the way, DiMaggio's was pretty high. DiMaggio had a 1.33. And the reason why I say that is because he and Gehrig have exactly the same number in slugging average. So here's Ruth. All those games, the Reds, of course, the Yankees win. But he was just phenomenal. Probably, he even went, in one game, he had 3 walks and still managed to go 1 for 1. I don't know why they were walking him in a 20-run game. To what, face Gehrig? That's what I always laugh about. Which also comes to the point, and I've said this in the past, how did both of them drive over, not just over 100 runs, but knock in, on average, about 130 RBIs a year? And, of course, Gehrig hitting all the grand slams. You say to yourself, oh, man, how did they even do that? They were just an incredible twosome. The greatest Probably, you know what? I'd even go so far as this. Find a greater pair of players, maybe Pippen and Jordan in the NBA. I'm not even going to start with hockey, but I guess Messier and Gretzky, but I know they were teammates. Don't know whether they were on the same line necessarily, and didn't know how long they played together. But you're talking about Ruth and Gurry playing about 7-8 years together at their prime. Just the most lethal combination of home run hitters and hitters galore. They both hit over 340 lifetime. And now this saves it for the last one. This is Lou Gehrig. Gehrig played in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He only played 7. And I'm laughing. I'm not laughing at them. The numbers are just so staggering that if I wrote them down and made up a fictional book, nobody would believe it. It would be like, doing a story about a kid in recreation basketball who nightly would score 130 points. Who would believe it? Even if it was fiction, it's hard to imagine. Now I'm doing this. Ready for this? Gehrig in those 7 games was 4 for 7, was 3 for 3, was 3 for 5. Had 2 bad games, went 1 for 3 and 1 for 5, but then 4 for 6 and 2 for 4. In the 2 for 4, he does absolutely nothing except score 3 runs and draw and knock home 1 run with 2 walks. Probably the most interesting one was 7/26, a July 26 game that he was involved with, and I can't find it here right now. But here was his line. That was the game he went 1 for 5. And ready for this? He was 1 for 5, but drove in 4 runs for his 110th, 111th, 112th, and 113th RBI. He also scored 2 runs and drew a walk. So you're starting to say, I had to look this up, the game. How did he score? And he didn't hit a home run or any extra base hits. So he drove in 2 runs with a base hit, drove in 2. I believe he walked home a guy with his base on balls, and then a ground out, force play, knocked in another run. That's how he got 4 RBIs. Even on a bad day, Gehrig was lethal. 1 for 5, 4 RBIs. He had a walk, so he still had a .333 on-base percentage with 2 runs scored. Now, let's total them up. Gehrig was 18 for 33 for a .545 batting average. Gehrig had an on-base percentage in those games of .637. Gehrig had a slugging percentage of 1.333, the same number as DiMaggio in his 5 games. Combined, I just want to do this. That's my last thing. Combined, they were 76. All those hitters I talked about were 76 for 145 for a .526 batting average. They drove in. They had 18 doubles, 5 triples, 24 home runs, 76 runs scored, 87 RBIs in a total of 34 games. If you put, let's just say it's 35 games, right? 4, you're talking about 120, 136, and they took 18 games off. Or even if you said that's half, right? Even if they won 36 games, that would be 144, right? And take 10 games off. They would have over almost 360 RBIs combined in the game with, ready for this, 96 home runs and 72 doubles to go with 20 triples or 22 triples. And I was being on the conservative side. Truly, these guys had great games when they scored 20. And just to give you an idea, In that 20-run game that I was talking about before, June the 3rd, 1932, it was played at Shibe Park in front of Philadelphia A's fans on June the 3rd, Friday. I don't know whether it was probably afternoon. It was a day game. Jumbo Brown wins the game to go 1-1. Roy Mahaffey loses 4-3. Lefty Gomez got the save. Actually, it started off pretty normal. It was 2-2 at the end of 3 frames. Yankees go up 4-2. And then the A's put up 6 to go up 8-4. The Yankees countered, scoring 3 times in the 5th inning, making it 8-7. They hold Philly scoreless, then take the lead with 2 in the top of the 6th. So they make it 9-8. Philly comes back, makes it 10-9. The Yankees go ahead, make it 12-10 with 3 in the 7th. They hold the Phillies, so they're up 12-10. They go up 14-10, and in the bottom of the 8th, Philly makes it close 14-12. And then the Yankees put up 6, just like the A's did, but man, they just buried them in the 9th inning, scoring 6 times to go up 20-12. And then the A's put up 1 courtesy number to make it 20-13. In the game, the Yankees had 23 hits, 5 errors. The A's had 13 runs on 13 hits and 1 error. This was a game Ruth goes 2 for 5. He was only hitting .282 at the time. And Lou Gehrig goes 4 for 6. 4 runs scored, 6 RBIs, and he had 4 home runs in the game. They were home runs. Ready for this? Number 11 off George Earnshaw in the 1st inning. Actually, he hit 3 off George Earnshaw. So he had his 8, 9, 10, and 11. He hit 3 off George Earnshaw in the 1st inning, in the 4th inning, and in the 5th inning. And then he hit 1 off Roy Mahaffey in the 7th inning. Earl Coombs had his 5th. Babe Ruth had his 15th. And Tony Lazzari, who also had some good games. I just didn't have time to really figure his out. I may go back and just do it for the fun of it. Tony Lazzari hit his 3rd off him. And so that was incredible. 4 for 6. Gehrig's probably his greatest game. He goes 4 for 6 with 6 RBIs. And Gehrig at that point, June the 3rd, was hitting .326. And I'm pretty sure I have that game. If I don't, I got to do quick calculations. Yeah, I do. I have that game. This was the game he would have 40 RBIs by the end. This was his 4 home run performance. Probably, I would say, Gehrig's greatest game. In this particular game, ready for this, Ruth and Gehrig combined for 6 hits and 11 at-bats, 6 runs, 7 RBIs, 1 walk, 5 home runs, a double. Just incredible. And in that game, Ruth does not complete it. He is replaced by a pinch runner. Merrill Hogue replaces him in that game. Gehrig goes the distance. That date, June the 3rd, 1932, when the Yankees put up 20 against the Philadelphia A's. One of 27 times they've done it in their history. And the monument, the Mount Rushmore players go a combined 76 for 145, 526 batting average with 24 home runs and 87 RBIs. This is Will O'Toole thanking you for joining me for another edition of Park Ridge Sports History. I want to thank Howard Fredericks, who has given me my idea for next week, what we're going to do. Astros and Mets, players who have played for both teams. It should be fun. Thank you. Have a great week.